So as a precursor to the next panel, I'd just like to invite Sudaraka Aryaratna again to share a short presentation before we move on to the discussion.
Hi everyone again. This second presentation is on the third and fourth discussion papers in our report, which are on the premiumization and the quality control aspects of Ceylon tea. And we make the point in the report that if we get these two things right, we would be able to, as a country, as an industry, unlock the true potential of Ceylon tea and earn higher revenues. And it would also help, going back to the previous panel discussion, bring a better quality life to the tea estate workers and smallholders as well. So when it comes to premiumization, we can't not talk about value addition. In the case of the tea industry, to basically get to 1 kilogram of made processed tea that you buy at the supermarket, you do require 4.5 kilograms of green leaf. That's the industry rule of thumb. So these 4.5 kilograms of green leaf cost 680 rupees at current market rate. And based on the prices of a kilogram of tea in Australian supermarkets, basically this 680 rupees worth of green leaf is turned into packets of tea that are worth 10,325 rupees, which is almost a value addition of 10,000 rupees in the process of value addition in the case of the tea bag that is sold at an Australian supermarket. And in Sri Lanka, there's always this discussion that happens about how we should add more value to our export goods. The general pattern of thinking seems to be that value addition is always a good thing. But what we wanted to emphasize in this report is that value addition is good, yes, but it's only good if the returns to the value addition that you do are higher than the costs of value addition. In the case of the tea industry, what we find that there are always high returns to packaged tea compared to bulk tea. But whether conventional packets of tea or tea bags is more profitable depends on the cost of each exporter, which is an interesting finding that we have, given that tea bags are usually considered a more advanced form of value addition compared to conventional packaging. But what we find is that it all depends on the costs that each exporter has to bear for this process of value addition based on their unique circumstances. And it's not always preferable to have tea bags, say, over tea packets. But one thing is clear when it comes to the tea industry of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is the world leader in value addition when it comes to black tea. Less than half of Sri Lanka's tea exports are bulk exports, and 39% of tea that is exported out of Sri Lanka is substantially value added. And these numbers come from the annual report or other annual reports of Sri Lanka Tea Board for the last couple of decades. And here you see on the screen a graph based on statistics from the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, which also shows that the black tea specifically exported by Sri Lanka is substantially value added. Compared to Sri Lanka, the country that comes in second place in terms of the extent of value addition that they do is India. And in India, less than 10% of tea is value added. So you see the substantial difference between Sri Lanka and its competitors in the black tea market when it comes to value addition. One thing to underscore here, though, is that Ceylon tea usually, once it's shipped out of Sri Lanka, tends to undergo further value addition in a lot of cases in countries like Russia, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, or Germany, based on a variety of reasons, one being differential tariffs that disincentivize local value addition, and another being the UAE and other countries basically functioning as tea export hubs in the world market, although they don't produce their own teas. In Sri Lanka, the low packaging costs are the main incentive to domestic value addition in the tea industry. The packaging costs are comparatively low in Sri Lanka compared to other countries. And this is partly because Sri Lanka has over time developed specialization in tea packaging, given that Sri Lanka obviously has a big tea industry. But the freight costs, on the other hand, are a deterrent to value addition in some cases, because it is more expensive to ship value added teas compared to bulk tea, because you obviously need more storage space in containers. If you look at the example of a 40 feet high cube container that exports Ceylon tea to Russia, to export 23,000 kilograms in bulk, you have to pay $5,800. But if you are exporting tea bags to Russia, to export the same $23,000, you need to pay $15,000. So there's a difference of $10,000 that adds on when you export value-added teas, and these freight costs are a huge deterrent to local value addition in some cases. And other deterrents are protectionist trade policy, both in terms of Sri Lanka and other countries. There's a ban on the import of other origin teas in Sri Lanka, which means if a Sri Lankan producer or an exporter wants to blend Ceylon tea with cheaper alternatives to come up with a blend that's more appealing to mass markets, that's lower cost, then they can't do it domestically. So those exporters tend to do these operations outside of Sri Lanka, so that lowers the amount of value addition that happens in Sri Lanka. And also there are differential tariffs by countries like Russia, Iran, and Egypt that have their own tea processing industries, which they want to protect. So they have higher tariffs on value-added teas reaching their countries, which disincentivizes exporters from adding value domestically. So they would rather do it once it reaches the destination. And also the setup of export companies in Sri Lanka, because a lot of the bigger export companies tend to be family business that have been in the business for a long time and have these conventional relationships, especially in the Middle East, where tea is usually purchased in bulk. And a lot of the time, these companies are comfortable with the relationships that they have, so they don't want to venture too much to explore with different other markets, and that also has an impact on the level of value addition in Sri Lanka. But when it comes to value addition, if you want to make Ceylon tea profitable, there are two strategies that we can take. One is price advantage, or basically going with the mass market. And if you want to have a price advantage for Ceylon tea, meaning if you want to basically price Ceylon tea at the lowest price possible, and therefore attract the mass market consumer who generally picks up their teas at supermarkets and so on, it is essential that we liberalize the import market and allow the import of other origin teas to be blended with Ceylon tea, because otherwise we can't compete with the Liptons and the Twinings of the world, who obviously sell tea at a very cheap price. And because, like I said in the earlier presentation, Ceylon tea itself is very costly to produce. There is no way that Ceylon tea can be sold in international supermarkets at this low price. So it's essential, imperative if we want to have an advantage in the mass market, that we go for liberalization. But we also have the option of product differentiation, which is basically premiumization. In this case, we will target not the mass market consumer, but a more sophisticated, more well-to-do consumer who may be interested in more artisan teas, or who may have a demand that takes the form of conspicuous consumption, that will be willing to pay more for the same amount of tea than the mass market consumer would. Or maybe we can pursue a hybrid strategy, and a lot has been talked about in this respect, and I'm not going to get deeper into that because the audience is mostly made up of people in the tea industry. But when it comes to premiumization, it is important that we understand theoretically what premiumization means. So what you see here on this slide is the conventional demand and supply graph that you see in economic theory. So in the general mass market, this is what happens. And you see that the price is the result of the interaction of the supply and demand. And although there are people who would be willing to pay higher prices for tea because we are selling in the mass market and we want to sell to as many consumers as possible, you end up settling for a lower price. What premiumization does is, instead of selling to this mass market consumer, just looks at the consumers that stand at the top of the demand curve who are willing to pay a higher price for the tea that Sri Lanka produces, and then sell a specialty tea to them. And of course, not every tea can be sold as a premium tea. So the question is whether Ceylon tea can be made premium. And we in the report make the point that Ceylon tea indeed can be premiumized because of the nature of the tea, the characteristics of the tea that we sell. In fact, Ceylon tea is already sort of a premium tea in the international market, because what Sri Lanka produces is black orthodox tea, which many other countries do not. Sri Lanka actually dominates the world market when it comes to the export of black orthodox tea. Sri Lanka produces more than half of the world's export supply of black orthodox teas. And when you actually get into the numbers here, you will see that Argentina produces 13.5% of global export of black orthodox tea. But when you look at the quality of Argentina's orthodox tea, if you look at the export prices, usually they're sold for $1 per kilogram in the international markets, and that's because the quality is so low, and usually bought up by American companies who produce iced teas. So the market there is completely different. So Sri Lanka does have a very dominant presence in the black orthodox tea market in the world, and that would allow Sri Lanka to basically premiumize its teas and sell to a different consumer than we usually sell to. So this will also help reach diverse markets, because right now we rely on a lot of these countries. These are the 9 countries that Sri Lanka sells most of its teas to, and has done so for the longest time. And if you look at these countries, you will realize that all of these countries have similar undertones of political unrest and economic unrest. And it is a very risky market to be doing business in. So in the interest of the sustenance of the industry itself, it makes sense that we try to move away from these markets. And also, it would allow Sri Lanka to get into more advanced markets to sell its tea in, to earn higher revenues. And the case study here is Japan, which of course was a competitor in the mass market for tea, but for green tea until around the 1980s. And then it decided to premiumize as the economy of Japan advanced and a lot of people got out of agriculture, as is happening in Sri Lanka. And what Japan did was basically reduce their production output, but what that helped them do is to premiumize their teas and earn substantially higher revenues for their teas than they did in the past. And you also see this happening somewhat with China. So China is just getting into the premiumization aspect of it. And what we argue in the report is that Sri Lanka also has the potential to do the same and earn higher revenues for Sri Lanka's teas in the international market. And this would also potentially help us move away from the supermarket model. Dr. Roshan Rajadure spoke extensively about the dominance of the supermarket or the retailers and how they extract a lot of the profits in the system and leave it out of the reach of the green leaf stage. But if we do premiumize our teas, then that would help us move away from the supermarket system and promote more direct and private sales between producers and consumers, and would also help basically bring more money into the production stage or the green leaf stage. And in terms of bringing more returns to the green leaf stage, it is also important that we look into whether vertical integration of the industry is possible in terms of getting the middlemen out of the industry so that even more money can be funneled to the green leaf stage at the end. But what we find in our research is that because of the particular makeup of the tea industry, with a lot of reliance on brokers to the transactions, it is probably not possible because the brokers actually do fill information gaps in the market by introducing the buyers and sellers, and also introducing or rather filling information gaps in the market on the quality of the tea that is being sold. So it does indeed lower transaction costs. So we might not be able to fully vertically integrate the tea industry, and also because blending is an important aspect of tea production, and it would not be possible under vertical integration, because for blending you need tea produced in different sources to be blended together, and vertical integration would not allow for that if we were to move to full vertical integration. So what we find is that the auction system is indeed necessary, but does it impede premiumization? And if so, how are we going to address these issues? So from the conversations we've had with stakeholders in the industry, what we found was that the invoice by invoice exemptions required to bypass the auction system right now obviously this incentivizes some producers who don't want to deal with this headache from premiumizing. And also the auction requires that minimum quantities be cataloged to be sold at the auction, which also might basically drive premium artisan teas out of the market, because they obviously happen at a smaller scale than what the auction generally caters to. And when it comes to quality control of the industry, it is also an important aspect of earning high revenues for the tea that we sell. And if you look at what the quality of tea actually means, there are subjective aspects to it. There's flavor profile, the aroma, the color infusion, and this is what usually the broker does. The broker comes in to help fill the information gap in these subjective areas in the market. You also have objective parameters of quality, the moisture levels, the caffeine levels, the gluten levels, the sugar levels, and also the manufacturing practices that are used, whether the tea is adulterated with other substances and all of that. And there are also more lately an ethical component that has been introduced to the conversation on quality, with a lot of people, especially in the international market, being concerned about labor rights, environmental sustenance, and corporate social responsibility, and so on. So all of these factors are important when you define the quality of tea. And the industry rule of thumb has for the longest time been that you pluck two leaves and a bud, which is then promptly transported to the factory so that the moisture levels are not affected, so that the green leaf is not trampled. And then it is blended once processed with other origin teas, so with other teas from other sources, so as to have a standard taste that you can cater to all year round, because tea production is mostly seasonal and you can't have a consistent taste and quality unless you blend with other teas. And then you also make sure that you store it in the required conditions in transit and warehouses to basically achieve the characteristics that you want from the tea. So the conventional industry rule of thumb is that if you have less than 3% of refused tea in the process of production, then you probably have good tea. But if you deviate from any of these requirements in the production process, then you're probably going to end up with tea that's considered of bad quality. And what we argue in the report is that there is an information asymmetry in the tea market, because the quality is unknown, because obviously there are subjective aspects to it, but also objective aspects to it. And when someone purchases tea, think of a consumer at the supermarket picking up a packet of tea. The consumer doesn't know about the quality of the tea beyond what's advertised in the packet. So what this means that is that the consumer will only want to pay the average of the price that the good quality tea deserves and the bad quality deserves. And obviously, this means that the good quality producer is going to be penalized in the process, and the bad quality producer is going to be rewarded, just because of this information asymmetry, and the consumer cannot distinguish between the good quality producer and the bad quality producer. And in the long run, this encourages all players to converge to the lower end of the quality in terms of production, because there are no monetary rewards in the market for producing good quality teas. And what we find in our research is that the high cost and complexity of certifications that are associated with communicating quality to the consumer discourage a lot of producers from actually relying on these certifications for this purpose. And also there's a proliferation of bought leaf factories when it comes to the smallholder sector, which has resulted in the in the undersupply of green leaf in the smallholder sector, which has led to the bad quality green leaf of any quality basically being processed in these boat leaf factories, and that has reduced the quality of production in the green leaf in the smallholder sector lately. And we also find that because of the institutional difficulties that the tea board has faced as a government agency with limited funding and human capital base that is not necessarily competent in the job that they're required to do, you also have a weak regulatory apparatus in the industry, and also there is weak execution of the regulatory framework, again, for a variety of reasons. A good example here is the fact that Sri Lanka has still not been able to get a geographic indication sorted out for Ceylon tea that is robust enough to basically drive counterfeit Ceylon tea producers out of the international market. And that has impacted the reputation of Ceylon tea abroad. And that is obviously, again, one of the factors why Sri Lanka has not been able to capture the returns that it deserves in the international market. There's also a lack of efficient technology when it comes to quality control, because the technology that right now exists is very expensive. So you can't necessarily test every batch of Ceylon tea that leaves the borders of Sri Lanka for quality in an efficient way that's affordable. So there's a lot of investments coming into the industry for research and development, and we hope that some of this will be sorted out in the recent future, and also in the near future. And also we have a lot of black market activity stemming from ill-informed government regulation that has also impacted the quality of Ceylon tea. For instance, when the use of glyphosate, which is a weedicide used in the tea industry, was banned in the Yahapalaniya government era, a lot of the a lot of the smallholders resorted to using MCPA, which is a weedicide that's generally used in the paddy industry. And what ended up happening was that because Japan does not allow for the use of MCPA, when Sri Lanka exported tea to Japan and Japan detected MCPA in the samples, it led to a huge decrease in the demand for Ceylon tea around that time, and the reliance of the Japanese consumer on Indian and Kenyan teas went up at the cost of Ceylon tea as a result. So this is one example of what compromising on quality does to Ceylon tea. So what we have recommended is the strategic use of certification, CSG and CSR initiatives by exporters and producers to communicate the quality of Ceylon tea, for the tea board and interested stakeholders to use a robust GI framework for Ceylon tea to ensure that the reputation of the tea in the international market is not diluted by counterfeit Ceylon tea brands, to give better market incentives for quality enhancements in the smallholder sector. Firstly, by getting rid of the political patronage that has encouraged the oversaturation of the market with boat leaf factories, and also to fund research and development into technological innovations for quality monitoring, and of course to bring in much needed reforms to the Sri Lanka Tea Board. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Mr. Niraj De Mel, the chairman of the Tea Board, has to say on this with respect to the role that the Tea Board currently plays in quality control, and what more can be done to enhance the quality of Ceylon tea on the part of the regulatory intervention by the Sri Lanka Tea Board. That brings me to the end of the presentation, and I will hand it back to the panelists for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Sudharatha. We'll now move into our second and final panel for this evening on quality control and premiumization, unlocking the true potential of Ceylon tea. Our first panelist for this evening is the chairperson of the Sri Lanka Tea Board, Niraj De Mel. In addition to his current role, he has also served as the past chairman of both the Tea Exporters Association and the Colombo Brokers Association, and he has also served as the vice chairman of the Colombo Tea Traders Association. Welcome, Niraj. As CEO of Dilma Tea, our second panelist, Dilhan C. Fernando, is a familiar name to many. As trustee of the Merrill J. Fernando Foundation and director of Dilma Conservation, Dilhan continues to fulfill his father's commitment to serving humanity and the environment through business. Welcome, Dilhan. To close the panel off, we have with us Dasarath Dassanayake, an independent tea manufacturing consultant. Formerly the head of manufacture for high-grown teas at John Keel's PLC, in his role as consultant, he works closely with tea smallholders and bought leaf factories. Welcome, Dasarath. And finally, our moderator for this panel is Rehana Tawfiq, a research consultant with Advocata. Once again, I'd like to remind you that as the discussion is going on, please feel free to send in your questions by scanning the QR code on the screen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So I must admit, last week when Dhananath asked me to moderate this panel, my expertise in tea was limited to being able to make and drink a cup of tea. But we are very lucky today that on this panel, we have three industry professionals who have, I think, collectively over 100 years of experience on this panel today. So I'd like to welcome all of you to this panel, and my name is Rehana. I'm very honored to moderate this panel. So let us get immediately, I suppose, to the questions, since Aisha has given an introduction to all of you. If I could begin with Mr. De Mel. So one sort of topic that Sudharaka raised in his presentation was this geographical indication scheme. So Ceylon cinnamon, for example, is a GI protected product in the European Union. And in 2004, India's Darjeeling tea was able to get access to this GI status. Now, Sri Lanka has been attempting, it seems, to get this GI status unsuccessfully for several years. And in the absence of this status, we have had some exporters who've told us that they are actually spending millions of dollars trying to fight, court cases on, fight fake Ceylon tea. So, can you tell us why has Sri Lanka struggled to gain this GI status, as well as we have been informed that there's a committee which has been appointed to look into this. So if you could tell us what is going on.
To correct you at the beginning, or let me first of all thank the organizers for inviting me for this panel discussion. We were not unsuccessful because this effort was started way back in the year 2000. Over the years, the various conditions for getting GI status has changed. And also tea, if I talk of Ceylon tea, is far more complex than Darjeeling tea and our very own Ceylon cinnamon. It's relatively easier to get cinnamon GI certified, but whereas ours is diverse, ours has so many different shapes and sizes of grades if you look at the tea leaf, and more the conditions have got tighter. The fact that Ceylon cinnamon is GI protected in EU is because, as I said, it's easy, plus also the fact that EU did not require a home registry. You may not believe it, but Sri Lanka has still not got the home registry for that. So without a home registry, you cannot go anywhere and say that we want GI protection in, let's say, US or for that matter, South America or wherever. But EU is relatively easy. That's probably why cinnamon was able to get. But they started their efforts much later than us. But thankfully, since about 3 years ago, with the help of CIRAD, an agency in France, have come forward to help us. Also for the EU market, who, as I said at the beginning, does not require a home registry. I think 4 years ago, some of us who are involved in this committee have met the relevant officials from the NIPO, that's the National Institute of Intellectual Property. Even at that time, what the person in charge said is still true today. They are still not being able to get the home registry on. So without a home registry, you're not starting anywhere. But thankfully, is fast-tracked through this effort, which will help us to get, hopefully if our application is applied, is successful, by within the course of next 1 year to 18 months, we should be able to get EU protection for Ceylon tea. But having said that, going into this matter, that's the committee you're talking of, is actually a fully fledged committee of the industry, of all stakeholders. There was a lot of differences of opinion. Some, like as you quite rightly said, some exporters felt that, look, this is one way in which I can get my this fake headache out of my way. Producers thought this is one way in which I can get my price doubled. But when it came down to conditions, a lot of them had their reservations. Producers wanted to have flexibility. So when you go into an effort like this, first and foremost, what is GI? You can't get GI for any old thing. It must be given to something that is recognized, cut above the rest. So in that case, there are certain things you have to bite the bullet and say, okay, my past baggage I'm going to put aside, I'm going to look afresh and go forward, which means there are a lot of things you have to come away from what you have been doing. You can't work from your current, your comfort zone and try to aspire for something at a different, higher level. So these are the issues with which we are, but now I think we are very much close to submitting our application to get that. But that's not the only way in which we could get a better price of Ceylon tea. There's a lot more. Let the discussions flow, then I will butt in at the time when I think it's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. De Mel. You said that there were certain things that we had to change. If you could elaborate a little bit.
First and foremost, we've got to go back to basics. If you talk of basics, it was quite rightly said by Sudharaka, 2 leaves and a bud. Talk to a planter today, they will say, yo, what nonsense. Climate change. This, that and the other, can't get that. We can't train and we have no pluckers, so we got to get the maximum possible. So when you do that and harm your bush, whatever initiatives people may talk of about sustainability, first and foremost, the core is the tea bush. That needs to be sustainable. So the basics have to be attended to. Even a third leaf that people talk of, I'm sure Steve will agree with me, because the time that he came in, that was the golden rule. Third leaf is, though, however succulent it may be, it is there to feed the first and the second rule. But I know most planters know that today, except for people of, let's say, Roshan's vintage, which are perhaps the last of the Mohicans. Today's people are driven by so many other requirements. So as a result of which, it's volume, volume, and volume. So when it's volume, volume, and volume, quality is forgotten, premiumization is forgotten, and you're catering to markets where the tea price is brought low and low and low.
Thank you, Mr. De Mel. If I could go to Mr. Fernando. As was pointed out by Sudharaka in his initial presentation, there are, the high production costs for Ceylon tea is very high. So it's targeting the mass market is not always a feasible option. But the premiumization of Ceylon tea still remains quite a viable route. If you could tell us your experience, and as well as what are the challenges to premiumizing Ceylon tea?
The challenges are as much domestic as they are international. Now the market has become incredibly complex and volatile. So when you talk about premiumization, it's not a question of simply investing in marketing and branding. It's identifying a unique position. It involves then cementing that position and getting, as Niraj mentioned, getting all the stakeholders on board to follow singularly, with single-minded commitment, that positioning. Because you can't go in the market and say, look, Ceylon tea is cheap, Ceylon tea is mid-price, Ceylon tea is a luxury. You can't sustain that because a brand is built in the mind of the consumer, and the consumer's perception is what will define value. Now, if you look at the information and the argument that was presented, yes, we are a high-cost producer, energy, labor, relative to others. Of course, the soils are also aging. But as in any situation, we have to look at what we actually have. We have a heritage that is unparalleled, both tea and cinnamon. We have a regulatory environment that is unmatched by most of these other competitors. We have a tea research institute. It needs more funding, etc., etc. And no matter what we complain, we must remember that relative to several of these markets that we are comparing ourselves to and competing within the market, we are not in a bad way. And so looking on the upside, we as exporters need to condition ourselves behind that singular proposition of quality. And in doing so, ultimately the evidence is in our export FOB. Unfortunately today, when you look at the export prices that Sri Lanka commands, I'm excluding Dilma, our commitment is to Ceylon and to quality, most of them are struggling to push further down, push as close as possible to the net sale average, which means there's no benefit to Sri Lanka. All you're doing is exporting the benefit, all the assets that Sri Lanka has in a great packaging industry, in a great history, etc. You're squandering it by passing it on at really a very cheap price to a packer overseas. So the definition of value addition is not because you take tea and put it into a tea bag. Value addition must deliver value to the country, must deliver value in terms of the export price. You take a tea bag, you produce a pack of 100 tea bags, sell it at $1.10, and you take all your inputs at cost. That's not value addition. Genuine value addition must fund innovation, must fund the future of the industry, must fund the welfare of the workers, must fund a lot of the issues that were discussed here. Now we are able, as Dilma, we are able to build field restrooms. We are able to address reproductive health on our estates because our brand is offered at nearly 3 times our country's net sale average, because we have the confidence in Ceylon Tea and we're able to command that value, which we're able to pass on to the industry. Sorry, it's a long answer. I'll stop now.
Not at all. I think both responses sort of are a leeway to my first question to Mr. Dassanayake. So you have 4 decades of experience in tea manufacturing, plantations and private tea factories. Do you see a difference in the quality of the tea from now and comparing to when you first joined the industry? And if you could elaborate on what the major differences are, as well as what can we do to, what are the corrective measures that we can take?
Thank you. As a matter of fact, I have 2 of my colleagues here. When I started my career, Mr. Morel, Mr. Anil Pereira. Of course, I must say, when I started my career, like what Mr. Niraj De Mel said, we need to have 2 reasons but to make the best possible tea. There is no question about it. So even in the Tea Act, it is there. Your quality of leaf is the 2 reasons but. I have seen this 2 reasons but, that type of quality of leaf in my life. Right, as when I started my career on a couple of estates. Of course, at that time, we had the labor. We had the labor, then we had the tea bushes, which were generating the sort of leaf. Then also, we had the field officers as well as the field people to get the pluckers to get that leaf in very short plucking rounds. Of course, those days, there were marks, there were garden marks which were sought after at the auctions by its name, particularly during the Western quality season as well as the Ua quality season. And it was a carnival. I mean, basically, actually, most of the younger generation wouldn't have seen this type of experience at the auction center. That type of unique teas coming from these most of the high-grown estates, especially in Hatton, Nuwara as well as Uwas. Those teas were manufactured out of this best type of leaf. The refuse tea percentage at that time was less than 3%. Less than 3%. Right? This is unheard of today. Because when we compare the refuse tea percentage from now to then, it's sad to say most of our high-grown estates are virtually getting more than 15% refuse tea. Certain places I have seen on my visits, 25%, 26% refuse tea. So, I mean, leaf is so bad. Then this has been spread to the low country as well. Because generally, when you started visiting these low country estates, their refuse tea percentage of something like 6%. Today, they have gone up to 14%, 15%. Anyway, I will elaborate on that when we talk about the smallholder activities. So anyway, from then to now, if you really compare tea to tea, yes. Because I remember when you go past the tea factories during the holiday season, my God, you get a super aroma coming from the tea factories. Even when you visit the factory, when you enter the tea factory, you get that tea aroma. I remember the first day that I went to visited the John Key's tea room. When I came out of the tea room, my shirts were smelling tea aroma, right? Anyway, which is not seen today. Anyway, having said that, even if the leaf stand has dropped, those days, of course, we used to make only a few grades like the BOP Fennings, BOP and Dastaman and a little bit of Peco, because manufacture was more on orthodox and Rotovan type of teas, right? So when we started this millennium, the low-grown tea market has really started growing up. So along with that thing, places like Uva, where they were struggling with the small leaf teas, had converted their manufacture to leafy manufacture. Of course, they didn't know exactly what to do at the initial stages. Their factories were, filled up with a lot of tea all over the place. I remember certain places having 116,000 kilos of tea just lying in the factory, 96,000 kilos of tea lying in the factory. That was because they didn't know exactly what to do. So then we had to intervene. We had to put in a lot of techniques there. I don't see Mr. Anravira Kon here anyway. Then, actually, we really wanted to, we really wanted to turn around this. You can't do the low-grown manufacture in the high-grown estate where a lot of potential is available. When you really take, say, for example, a place like Uva Highlands, say, for example, a place like, say, Vevassa, which used to make quality during the quality season, you just can't do low country manufacture where a lot of, basically light rolling, long fermentation, hard firing, that sort of things would end up with basically baked teas, overfired teas. So we came out with a strategy. We spoke to the plantation company. We came out with a strategy to turn around, complete this sort of manufacturing process. Of course, at that time, the superintendent was keen in getting us the best possible leaf. Basically, his leaf count was something like 80%. Refused percentage was something like 3%, 4%, 5%. We really completely turned around the low country manufacture to leafy, semi-leafy, liquoring sort of a standard. Actually, that tea, initially we were not able to sell this tea because the trade didn't want, the trade didn't think that this tea was manufactured correctly, in the sense because they were very bright liquoring teas with short fermentation. So they didn't accept the tea immediately. But anyway, we were fortunate that later on this tea was accepted. This tea came from Sania Estate. Of course, actually our target was to achieve 160 sale average at that time. That year in the 2004, we ended up at 203.54 for the first time ever. Who estates has got up to 200 plus sale average with this type of tea. Now, here what I want to say is that if you have super leaf, if you have very good leaf, you can make a unique tea, you can really make a brand out of it. So that is the way forward for us also. If someone can afford to go in for that sort of a strategy, I think because everyone will not be able to do it. But if someone wants to do it like the way that we used to do in the past, that is the way forward, as far as the quality is concerned.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dassanayake. Mr. De Mel, I saw you nodding your head, so I would like you also to add something to that.
I would want to say anything more than that. I fully agree with what he was saying. Before I forget, going back to the GI, actually one of the reasons that we really couldn't get through, or what stood in the way, was the fact that there had to be a differentiation factor. What makes Ceylon tea different from, let's say, Indian tea or Kenyan tea? So that isotope technology was not available back then in the first decade of this century. It was back in, that's why application to initially to Europe failed in 2012 purely because of that. But this came through with the help of the Atomic Agency. And with that, we have been able to now find out of 4 items, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and carbon, 2 of which we were able to find out that we were able to arrive at factors that we have a higher of those 2 oxygen and hydrogen compared to Kenyan teas, and so that became a strong point to make the claim.
Right. Mr. Fernando, there is a law in Sri Lanka that requires every kilogram of tea to be sold through the Colombo tea auction. Now, some opponents suggest that the auction model actually discourages vertical integration, and with mostly middlemen pocketing most of the tea revenues and leaving little behind for the green leaf stage of the production. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you think the auction model is still relevant?
I think it's a democratic and fair marketplace. I think it is relevant. I don't think it is a disincentive to quality. Certainly it hasn't been any issue for us. There are provisions for small niche teas and niche batches, but I think it's important, particularly if somebody new wants to come in to the industry. It's important that they have a marketplace that they can access. Right now, you have a digital marketplace. It's a great place to be able to purchase tea with the benefit of the broker's involvement in I guess as a watchdog to an extent, but also the administrative aspect of it. But at the same time, if say, okay, we have an involvement with several plantation companies, so if we produce an extraordinary tea and try to take it and profit in another entity, the marketplace is a sure way of establishing the true value. So if we produce a tea worth 25,000 and we try to sell it to ourselves through some sort of transfer pricing mechanism, the marketplace will surely take care of it because everybody else would have tasted and would determine its true value. I think for the country, it's a good thing. For anyone who has a ulterior motive, transfer pricing, it's not.
Actually, adding to that, I must say that the very fact that India has decided to bring back 50% of the teas must be sold through the auction just a few days ago is a pointer to confirm that you need the auction system, and naturally that middleman plays, the so-called middleman, it's only 1% basically, right? But the fact is, it's not practical for a producer, because as I said, Ceylon Tea is so diverse. Take the type of teas he makes, this is suitable for this kind of buyer, they'll go there and considering today's traffic, whereas the people who are responsible for make things happen in the auction do know the demands of various the buyers, as we call it. So only thing is the model should now be taken to the next level, where you bring in, the broker can play a predominant role here in bringing the end user at the front end. For example, if you say the Dilma's market in some place or the other, he has a particular type of requirement, bring that in, give a kind of a win-win price arrangement with the producers, but buy through the auctions. Of course, if there's additional demand coming in, not for long periods, I'm talking of have a kind of a price assurance for 3 auctions or 4 auctions, so that the producer knows which way to produce his teas. At least he's given some sort of a roadmap. Today, it's basically a blank area. You're just producing and putting in. If the demand is good, if there are 3 buyers today compared to 2 last week, then the price will go up. Next week, one of those people decide to leave out, and then the price comes down. So that means you're groping in the dark. So you need that kind of specialization, for which I think the middleman here, in this case is the broker, can play a lot more, a far more strategic role. Plus it will also help the producer as well as even the buyer sourcing his teas.
There are some audience questions that have come in. I think this may be we can address it to Mr. Fernando. There's a question saying, can exporters contribute to reducing market fluctuations despite the dollar devaluation if the product quality increases? I suppose it's to do with export revenues.
You can't really reduce. I mean, that would mean some sort of interventionist mechanism. No, I mean, I think the auction prevails, but it recalibrates whenever there is, I mean, that history has proven that, it recalibrates because, of course, there is, most of our industry is driven by bulk. So yeah, it recalibrates. I don't think the exporters can artificially influence the market. I don't think that should happen. But yeah, sorry, I'm not clear on that. But no, short answer is no, we shouldn't be intervening in that. Let the market
Perhaps
place.
the person who said that question can clarify. But anyway, there's a question, I think I mean, I would like any one of you to answer. There's a question about digitization of the value chain, and can that be used as a solution to some of these challenges?
Yes and no.
Could you elaborate?
Well, I mean, I mean, all kudos to, and I know we must applaud the people responsible in, coming away from the outcry auction to the electronic platform. But still, some of the areas that people spoke of that were not acceptable in the outcry auction, in different ways, it does happen even in the electronic auction. So simply by going digitization doesn't mean that, it addresses all ill. That's out of the way. But actually, we've got to be practical. And of course, that solution was thrust upon us at a time when we were helpless. Had that solution not been there, or that already not been there, we would not have been able to have auctions for a good, at least till about May, when the country finally opened up after the first lockdown in March 2020. So there is the plus and the minus for it, but definitely we've got to go that way, because no longer can people waste time at one place where they could have done a lot more other things which they would have otherwise had to be content with by being in the auction rooms. If that is the answer to the digitization, whatever the question means.
Would anyone else like to add anything?
Digitization is always good. It eliminates certain leakages and so on in the market. It was done brilliantly. Now the safeguards, value addition can be done. Once you have that database, once you have that mechanism in place, you can add the layers of efficiency, but also mitigating some of the possibilities for leakage and issues. So I think the point is, yes, you can criticize it, you can say there are bad things about it, but the fact is, it's given us a platform that's robust, and it's given us a way forward. So my assessment would be, it's pretty good.
Thank you. Mr. Dassanayake, if I could come back to you, there are certain quality issues related to tea smallholders which can be explained by the revenue share model, which incentivizes quantity over quality. And also the fact that automation can sometimes be too costly, which can prohibit that route being followed. So what are your thoughts on this, and how can we incentivize tea smallholders to elevate the quality of the tea that they produce?
That's a very big question, like this way, because in the recent past we have seen a lot of private factories emerging, because they have got the registration from the tea board, I think, without considering the fact that there is a limited quantity of green leaf available in one particular area. So as a result, what has happened, the availability of leaf has now got spread over all these, basically wherever they have been manufacturing it, as well as the new places. As a result, what is happening, there has been a competition. Now this competition also has now gone beyond limits now, because some of the private factories were doing very well with very good standard of leaf, and they were getting this type of leaf into their factories, they were doing very well. But with the emergence of these new factories, what has happened, they have paid over and above the minimum rate, and from their own pockets, which also has gone beyond the limits now. It is not 1 or 2 rupees, or even 5, 10 rupees, even 30, 40 rupees. Right? Most of this money is borrowed from the brokers also. Right? So then, anyway, I don't blame the brokers, but anyway, whenever someone wants to pay a price for the bought leaf, anyway, anyone will give, will lend. So what has happened, because of that thing, the factories that were doing very well now are not able to get the sufficient leaf into their factories. Because in most of the factories, we make a minimum of 15 to 16 grades. So in order to have our correct grade mix catalog for the sales, we have to have at least 6,000-7,000 kilos of green leaf a day. So when the other estates are paying up prices just like that, so these particular factories go short. I mean, basically, they are short of leaf to do the manufacture. We have to come out with some kind of model here, because the big people, those who are having money, are spending money like that way, whereas particularly the corporate sector, private factories, they can't do this. But they are they're within certain parameters. I mean, basically, they can't go beyond that. We have to have some. We have to come out with some kind of a model. It's like this. But I thought of a model. We have to analyze the availability of leaf in a particular area or in a particular agroclimatic sub-district. Then, based on that total quantity, we can rationalize amongst the tea factories in that area, because there was a rule previously, I mean, long time ago, within a certain kilometer only, the bought leaf people can supply the leaf to factories. So now, some of the private factories are going beyond their limits. I mean, they are going even 30-40 miles away, 30-40 kilometers away to bring the leaf into their factories. By doing that, then they deprive those factories of the leaf that they should have got. So, anyway, I can't offhand give you an answer for this. Basically, even the smallholder will have to be incentivized, correct? But at the same time, we have to think about the private factory owners also, because we are working on that 21.5% outturn according to the formula. Whenever you happen to get bad leaf into these factories, you can't get that 21.5% outturn. Most of the factories are getting just around 20% or 19%. Whereas the bought leaf formula is being worked out on 21.5%. So then at the same time, on the top of it, other states, other tea factories are coming and pay up more price on the bought leaf, and they take their leaf into those factories. So I can't give a answer straight. I will ask Niraj De Mel to answer that question.
So actually, Sudharaka pointed out about weak regulatory system. Actually, it's more than the regulatory system is perfect. What was established it's called the Tea Control Act of 1958 or 1957. It's as old as I am. That act, all those clauses there are even true today. It's just that the implementation has been very weak. And to that, since moving away from tea control department and the setting up of the tea board, and I believe the first 20 years of the tea board would have been fine, thereafter, there has been a lot of weaknesses in our system. What he said was all there. It's all there. Actually, tea board, nobody can actually set up a factory and then go and apply to the tea board and say, look, I put up a factory, now give me the license. No, they cannot do that. If they have a plan of setting up, they have to first tell the tea board, I have an idea of putting in this particular village, in this area, I want to put up a tea factory. So tea board will do an assessment to see whether there's a need for another factory. That means, is there more leaf available in this area? Now, all that went out of the window because of various reasons, which I don't want to go back on. As we know the system in the country, what has happened in the last 15, 20 years or more. So as a result of that, everything has made this beautiful Tea Control Act become weak. It's the implementation that's required. The moment you implement all that, even achieving 21.5, come what may, climate change, whatever, bush is also life, you and I are also alive, we are also still going through with these hectic temperatures. There are ways in which by nature the bush will adjust itself. If you add too much fertilizer, you will ruin the bush. You will ruin the soil. So these things have happened. For greed, people have said, no, don't go by TRI regulations of 3 applications per year. You apply more. For the fertilizer marketers to market their product and get a higher bottom line, they say, no, put more. That's good. That will bring in more productivity. And these people go on applying. And talk to a smallholder, he will swallow anything that you tell them. So these are the problems. So the strict monitoring has to come back. But all of the stakeholders are responsible. So if you are coming in as a smallholder, if you are coming in as a broker, if you are coming in as a tea factory owner, everybody must know what business am I in, what quality is expected. We speak of premiumization, we can only achieve that if we all play according to the rule book.
I suppose it's, as Mr. Fernando said, all of us have to be on one singular line. So there's also there's an audience question, but I had anyway planned to ask this question from all of you as well. So at present, Sri Lanka doesn't allow the importation of teas from other origins. And with premiumization, while it has been kind of a long-standing idea, for many people it may still be kind of a pie in the sky. So to target the mass market, Sri Lanka and for Sri Lanka, Ceylon tea to be more price competitive, blending would be kind of blending with other origin teas may be kind of a feasible option. So I would like you all to weigh in with your thoughts. I'm sure there'll be opposing views on the matter.
Okay, the objective is clearly value addition. Every kilo of tea that Sri Lanka might bring in, theoretically, from another cheap origin, would be a kilo less of Ceylon tea sold. Today we sell all our tea, most of it, pretty much all of it. So that would be a kilo less of Ceylon tea sold. Strategically, our objective would be to push to promote value addition. The reason is we are a high-cost producer. You have to align your strategy and your objectives with your resources. High-cost resources, go for quality. We don't have to cry about energy costs, labor costs. Our labor have every right to expect better lives, as do we. But we have to align our strategy with that objective. So therefore, bringing in tea from anywhere else, and it would represent value reduction, in theory. Okay, assume that you accept that. Look at the labor and energy costs, operating costs in Vietnam. We would be dead in the water trying to compete with Vietnam. India, we would be dead in the water trying to compete with India. The list goes on. Indonesia, Kenya has set a 600 million kilo target for production. Rwanda is going to 100 million kilos. Kenya will be producing orthodox teas this year. So our only possibility for survival of our industry, addressing all of these social and welfare issues that were highlighted in the last panel, is for us to genuinely add value. And there is no place in that for importation of anything cheaper, but there is a place for us to unify behind, even if it's a smaller industry, an industry that genuinely adds value.
We can't say that we don't allow imports. We do allow imports of tea types which are not grown in this country. Darjeeling for one, Chinese green tea for another, and anything kind of speciality for those different countries are allowed to be imported here. Having said that, what do we want? We talk of premiumization. Classic example is the Iran-Sri Lanka barter, the tea for oil barter. Paying a higher price, of course, it saves them from not having to look for dollars, and we have to pay them, settle some old debts. But the fact that they're willing to pay that price and come for Ceylon tea at the expense of cheaper Kenyans, cheaper Assams, when they are willing to come $2 cheaper than Ceylon, or even $2.50, is in itself an indication that we are still living by the word that Ceylon tea was known the world over as a quality producer. If that is this thing, we should be able to sell ourselves. Why do we need something else and then go on a mixed way where we want to talk of premiumization, but we still want to compete in the supermarket? For that, our teas are too expensive, so therefore we need the foreign import thing to bring in, mix it, and then be competitive there. What are we saying? We are sending mixed signals around the corner. So our production is small, our teas are so diverse. When the production was 300 million kilos not so long ago, at the turn of 2015, let's say the type of teas that go to Iran was 20 million. Today it's down to 250. Iran types 20 million will come down to about 16. So similarly, other countries. So when everybody still wants that thing and they come in there, naturally the tea prices go up. So in that scenario, why do we want to bring in something else just because it's cheap? So that's one way of looking at it. I also once subscribed to the view that we need importation of tea so that we can be hobnobbing with people like the Liptons and the likes in this world. But having said that, here we talk of Ceylon tea, premium tea, and so on and so forth. Then we should go that pathway. We should be the Glenfiddich or the malt whiskies and not be the VAT 69, you see?
Thank you. So unfortunately, we've come to, would you like to add something? Yes.
I have a small question to ask. We are talking about black Ceylon tea. Now, when I go to the broker's tea tasting room from the low grounds, I can see grey tea. Teas are virtually grey in color, even the off grades. Most of the tea, 90% of the tea is grey in color. Are we accepting this position? If we are calling our Ceylon tea as black Ceylon tea, are we accepting the fact that our teas are now getting grey? Buyers are paying up a price also on these teas. Where are we heading for? I have a question there.
I suppose that's something we can all ponder over a cup of tea. So I mean, I'd like to thank the three panelists for, sorry, yes.
My question is to you, Dilhan. This is about, extracting higher price, some of the long leaf. If you, the tea bag is a packaging innovation that made it convenient to make a cup of tea. Rupees to make, of which the value of the tea is 150, while a pyramid tea bag is 15 rupees, and the value of tea is like 2 rupees in the bag. So like we have seen in the photocopy market that the market for paper took off when the cost of copying came down significantly. If the cost of the pyramid tea bag came down significantly, like from 15 rupees to 750, do you think that there could be a significant increase in the demand for this long leaf tea because you solve the convenience problem?
No, I don't think so, because there is as much opportunity in loose leaf tea, particularly now with emphasis on compostability, on sustainability, etc. The most efficient, regardless of any, I'm a Puritan, so regardless of my personal preference for loose leaf tea, if we pitch to the consumer that this is the most sustainable form in terms of waste, plastics, plastic residues, etc., then there is an opportunity. Yes, absolutely. Triangular tea bags have a great opportunity. But remember that we are operating in a market where it is not tea versus coffee, it is not tea versus anything. The Gen Z has given us an opportunity that is unimaginable. With tea, it's a question of how well we communicate our heritage, our quality, our story, our tea country, the lives of the people, the sustainability, the whole thing. You create a brand ecosystem, and Gen Z will accept anything. Look at the value addition in water. Look at the aisle. Look at the number of bays devoted to still water in most countries. It is today greater than tea. So if you consider where the future of Sri Lanka lies, it is not limited to saying, look, let's look at different formats and so on. Certainly there's something there, but the opportunity for us is to go out of these so-called traditional markets, which are what we are operating in. It is to look at the market brutally and say Egypt was one of our top markets. Today, zero. Well, not zero. I mean, you're really hard pushed to find Ceylon tea. Go to England. I challenge anyone to find quality Ceylon tea. I challenge anyone to find a Sri Lankan brand that can survive on those shelves. Go to the US, nothing. Italy, nothing. So it's a question. But the consumer is ready. The consumer wants ethics, wants sustainability, wants plant-based antioxidants. They want everything we have. We are perfectly aligned with this new generation of consumer, whether it is loose leaf, triangular, or the small leaf grades, the Fannings and so on for tea bags. It's a question of how we position ourselves, how we as an industry align, and how we then come together to communicate. We have to be single-minded. You can't. Last week I was at Gulf Food. You have one company that's talking about luxury and giving beautiful packaging. and 100 feet away, there's somebody with a Lipton copy saying, we are Ceylon Tea, we are this, we are that, with a copy from 1980s Lipton. You can't. We have to be single-minded. Even if we lose 100 million kilos, it's better to sell 150 million kilos of Ceylon Tea profitably than to be doing what we're doing now and trying to compete on price. This is my opinion.
Sure.
I give a brief history of my history with the tea industry, and the question can be asked, what the hell are you doing here? Now, I am a journalist now, and I am quite good at my job, you know. I'll tell you how good I am. I write a load of rubbish that nobody reads. That's how good I am. However, the question I'd like to ask now is, which has been quite confusing over the evening, people have mentioned Sri Lanka tea, and people have also mentioned Ceylon tea. Now, what is the brand that we are looking forward to in future? Or is it Sri Lanka, or is it Ceylon tea?
Ceylon Tea.
Good, thank you. Also, one more question. The TRI was mentioned. Is anybody from the TRI here? I don't think so. Why aren't they here? They should have
Cannot
been
afford
invited.
5,000 rupees.
Okay, fine. Well, those are the questions I like to ask.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank each of the panelists. You have enriched this discussion, and we've had quite a few laughs. So thank you very much, and thank you to the audience as well.
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for joining us here today. Thank you again for this wonderful discussions that we've had. I'd just like to let you all know that if you would like to access the report on market competitiveness of the tea industry of Sri Lanka, you can scan the QR code on the screen, and you can also access it through the Advocata main page. That's www.advocata.org. And thank you again for joining us this evening and engaging with us. We hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you.